Welcome to No Master, No Slave. A show that seeks to reveal the hidden aspects of our world. History, philosophy, science, spirituality, and the truth of that which is. No master, no slave.
Welcome to No Master, No Slave. This is episode number 9. I'm Zach, and I'm joined with Nick and Mike. We are continuing our series on the methods of mind control, or the 14 methods of manipulation. We've gone over so far obfuscation, worldview poisoning, primal fears, and today we're going to dive into the divide and conquer strategy. This strategy has been wielded against mankind, I would argue, since its onset. Manipulators and those wielders of violence divide people amongst themselves and others to make it easier to control them and enslave them. The reality is we're all in this together. The only true divide is those who are willing to use violence against others and those who support that and those who do not. So there's a lot to cover on this. There's a lot of different topics to get into. The first note I got here is the divide of gender. You give the boys blue and you give the girls pink. You give the boys some spatial awareness with some blocks to build, and the girls are doing the artsy, creative stuff. And there are some real biological tendencies and differences between guys and girls, but it divides us with this cultural, unnecessary separation between the roles of guys and girls when spiritually on a higher level, we're all pretty similar. I mean, we've got internal feminine expressions of consciousness and external, outward projections of masculine expressions of consciousness. And the goal is to find a balance in those in that polarity so that we're, unified. It's ridiculous. We really just need to come together and as men and women and all these different divides and just realize, hey, there's guys that are trying to split us up into a bunch of pieces so they can just pick us up and do what they want with us.
Right. The divide and conquer strategy, or in other words, the divide and rule strategy used by psychopathic manipulators to control people, is all about breaking up the power of the people into smaller and smaller, more manageable pieces in order to control the aggregate of humanity more easily. The divisions must be constantly propagated in order to keep the people from unifying and uniting their power again. So it's really just a big distraction game to keep people weak and divided and therefore more easily ruled and conquered.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many methods we're just going to touch on as many as we can today, but I mean, there's everything from East versus West in the world, to what Zach was talking about down to the simple, male versus female. I mean, science versus religion, foreigner versus citizen, gun owners versus non-gun owners, cops versus people, truther versus disinfo agent. I mean, that's just naming black versus white. It's absolutely, it literally is almost endless. You can almost find almost any situation, and you can find a divide and conquer tactic being played off against the people. I mean, you just look at our own country right now in the U.S. The whole gun owners versus non-gun owners thing, and then you have the quote-unquote right-wingers or conspiracy theorists versus the non-conspiracy theorists and the whatever else other wing you're talking about. Obviously, both wings are in the same bird. It's just a divisive political tactic. That whole right wing versus left wing. I'm no wing. I mean, just be of your own person and just understand your own individuality. But I mean, just getting into the gun owners versus non-gun owners, that's so easily played off against people. I mean, you could say, we talked about the whole quote-unquote assault rifles versus battle rifles, terminology in the previous podcast. And it's that simple. You could easily play off, like, people who have guns are somehow bad people. That, there's no reason to have, a battle rifle in your home. Yeah, and they don't want to look at the facts of government and what governments do in the world of committing genocide against their own people. I know we've talked about democide a lot in this show, but it's true. It's, and you get into that whole situation, people are now looking at you've fallen right back into the trap of now we've got these people over here and these people over there. We're coming up to another mockery voting thing. Oh boy, I can't wait. It's ridiculous. It's two-party system is it's a complete joke. Democrat, Republican, the same thing. They are just terms and boxes to put people in, so they keep themselves from seeing the truth and focusing on the system, which is really the problem. The system of control and anti-life, which is continually trying to discard humanity in order to balance the books, in order to continue improving the economy, because that's all it's all about. Improve the system, improve technology, improve the economy at the expense of humanity and our own care.
The political one is really interesting. You got the left political side and the right political side. You got the blue and the red. You've got the more masculine and the more feminine. And it ties in with, say, an individual, whether they know it or not, may have been brought up in a situation where they had a lack of nurturing and care in their upbringing. And maybe they have a little bit of fear inside and they don't have enough self-confidence to be able to work amongst the people in their communities and independently themselves to care and provide for themselves and the people around them. They have an extension of that childhood and they want that parental figure to come in and be the nurturer and the caregiver. That would be very democratic. Or maybe it's the other polarity and they have a lack of responsibility or self-confidence and the ability to protect. And maybe there was something in their past where there wasn't a protector or a fatherly figure that could protect them from the threats and the predators. And so that would be like a Republican arm of it. And like you were saying, two different legs on the same torso, but they have almost polar expressions, but they're heading in the same direction. So the fact that when the left leg is moving forward, the right leg is moving backwards as the torso moves in one direction, it confuses people and they see that polarity of those different expressions of that one thing going in one direction and they forget that it's actually one thing and they think, well, if it's not this, then it's that. If you're not going left, you're going right. It's just a really, to me, that should be one of the more obvious, our political system in the United States should be one of the more obvious divide and conquer strategies. The two-party system, it's just so blatant.
The more that people are trained and indoctrinated by the media and by their upbringing to be hyper-focused on all the petty and superficial differences between themselves and others, the more people are susceptible to this manipulation tactic of divide and conquer. If we stop to realize that we all have the same basic needs and are made up of the same basic stuff, we can quickly see the benefits of being unified and working together towards the common good that serves all of humanity equally. So what dominators must do to keep that from happening is constantly subject the people to massive propaganda campaigns that stir up negative emotions and poisonous worldviews to keep the different groups or tribes of people at war with one another and the aggregate of humanity weakened and divided amongst itself. This is the condition humanity must be in for it to even be possible for dominators and controllers to manipulate the people into sympathizing with government violence, fighting perpetual wars under false pretenses, and all the rest of the work of the psychopathic occult parasites who engineer all this division. With all the people divided because of all their differences, they are much easier to control. The divided groups are more likely to tolerate violence done to people they see as different and therefore separate from them. So when one compartmentalized group sees government and other cults of psychopaths violating other compartmentalized groups of people's rights, the whole people offer up no resistance because they're divided and don't have any true connection through compassion or empathy for other compartmentalized groups. Whereas if the people are unified by what they all have in common and the rights they all inherently own, they wouldn't tolerate or sympathize with any dominator's agenda.
Yeah, and the thing is, the criminal elite are very good at actually cooperating. they may not agree on everything, but they actually agree on one thing, which is control. They all agree on all the different factions. There's many different arms and legs to this beast called the criminal elite, but into the different psychopaths. But they never really divide they never really divide and conquer themselves. They really stay to the overall agenda of control, even if it may not look like that at times. I mean, yeah, they might toss out a faction here and there, I think, when they've run their course or run their usefulness, but they really stick to that, and it's kind of something like we almost could learn from them in a good way by not everyone has to get along in the same, we don't have to agree on all the same things. We just have to have just a simple common bond, of such things that we all want anyway, such as peace and love and freedom. We all say we want these things, but we don't go and learn how to really achieve these things. We think we're going about them in the right way, but we're just following the way the education system taught us. We're just following that path. We need to discover the path of sovereignty, of self-ownership, and of also not violating anyone else's rights. Understanding what a right and wrong is a real true path to freedom, and it'll help us get out of this. It'll help us get out of this divide and conquer strategy that's been so well used against the people of the planet. It's been. I mean, I just want to bring up science versus religion. That's another big thing. People want to. Oh, okay, I'm not religious, so I must be scientific, or I'm not scientific, I must be religious. And then, you have these two sides battling with each other when it's just we need to fuse them into just some. Well, marry them and blend them because they're both, spirituality and matter. Yeah, they're the same thing. They're both of value. One's not over the other. And that's why both will always fail and have difficulty coming up with some, solution to all the problems, because the problem is they're creating a division in their own mind, in their own understanding of the world around them. They need to understand that knowing how things work is very important, and also having a spiritual and empathic understanding and care for the universe around you that's a perfect blend of science and religion versus just, I believe in this certain God figure, or, well, matter's the answer, and we'll just break everything down to the smallest atom until we find that tiniest particle, we can figure out what it's all about. And it's not just some random mechanical worldview, which people, some scientific types, or I like to call it scientism, which is really just you're so entwined into science and the material, and also just the whole government funded science. If it's not peer reviewed, you're always throwing out other scientists. That's a division in itself. The science community having independent scientists always being rejected by the scientific community when they have really useful, valuable information, but it's just not being, peer reviewed. It's just not going through that really stringent process, which is just a bunch of people who pretty much agree on the same thing, not really questioning anything.
Yeah, whether it's science or religion, when people take a particular authority as truth rather than taking truth as authority, then it creates a lot of divisions, because different people, since they're not basing what is authority based on whether or not it has a contradiction and can be observed and experienced, they're basing it on different quote-unquote authorities. There's all these different people with different ideas of who their authority is, and then they all start battling with each other, fighting with each other, and they get divided amongst themselves. The etymology of the word religion ties into this, because religare has kind of two opposite almost connotations that it can be used with. So religare can mean to thwart forward progress and to bind and hold back. And, if it's a religion that where you're saying that this particular authority is truth, then yeah, that does hold you back, because now you're not looking for non-contradicting information and things that have principle of correspondence and pattern. You're just looking for authority. But the other way that word can be used etymologically, religare can mean to unite. And if truth is taken as authority and people unite around that which has no contradiction, and you unite around that which is right, then we could have a true religion, a true unity where we're not divided amongst arbitrary authorities, but we're unified around what is right and around that which is, around that which we can observe and discover and experience.
Another huge division point that keeps people from working together and being unified is financial wealth. People with a lot of money and people with little to no money are often pitted against each other. You have one group hoarding money due to a fear-based worldview of scarcity and materiality, and then the other group who suffers from the lack of money and therefore isn't having their needs met. The later, more unfortunate group often has the tendency of becoming very bitter and hateful towards the wealthier upper class, while the wealthier upper class looks at the less fortunate with fear and disgust. The poisonous worldviews of both sides have to be maintained through rationalizing and relativistic arguments that write off each opposing side as the problem. This further deepens the divide and creates more tension and static between the people, when ultimately there is still only humanity as the one real group. All the people's needs and makeup are still the same, but with the financial system added to the equation, money has become what decides whether people's needs are met in society. The divisions created by the financial system stir up a lot of stress and a lot of desperation in society. The unfortunate poor people are desperate to have their needs met and to secure some form of comfort and consistency in their lives, while the richer people are desperate to not end up like the poor people. And since most people are trained from birth to equate money with comfort and security and maintain a scarcity-based worldview, the people compete and fight each other for money, rather than cooperate and unify to create a better system of living that secures the rights and needs for all people.
Yeah, man, if it wasn't so sad, it would almost be hilarious, because if you think about what true currency is, it's time and attention. You know, that's the currency of consciousness. Spend time and you pay attention. And there's a lot of people out there that are wasting the true currency. They're wasting time and attention on the fake currency, money. So they're wasting the currency of consciousness to hoard and gain more and more of the resistor of that currency. So it's an interesting irony that is going on there.
Which is very difficult to communicate to people, because people see money as real because they get the bill, they hand it over, and then they get the good for it. You know, so it's and the way it's set up, it creates a lot of confusion when you start to try and communicate that. When you try to communicate that money is only an illusion that is propped up in our minds by our belief in it. So you're absolutely right. It is a strange irony. But what makes it so frustrating is it's very difficult to communicate that and get that whole concept across to somebody who wants to resist that idea, because they see that they can take that bill, hand it over, and get a good immediately, because the belief is so strong in it in the collective.
Yeah, one very powerful technique that's used right now is the cops versus the people. You know, you have this ever-growing police force that continues to get militarized, and then you have a people who get continually mad at all the violence against them, when they just should both realize they're both people. The system is what's screwing both of them. It's going to throw all of them under the bus. The cops would be the first to go, them and their families. In any situation, I mean, right? Okay, the people are dealt with. I mean, you better believe the cops are going next. The system has used you for what it needed. Now it will discard you. And cops need to realize that we're people. They're just like us. They have families. I mean, they need to stop dividing us, and whatever people out there too need to stop dividing against them. I mean, I'm not saying, obviously there's a lot of reasons to be mad at the situation, but it's just a tool being used against the people and the police. And we have to recognize that it's just a tool being used against us, just another tactic for division, and that we have to find some type of peaceful solution to this and stop warring amongst ourselves, because it will only end in more bloodshed for everybody. It will only end in more. The thing that everyone fears is chaos, and then you're going to get just that if you continue supporting these institutions. And I mean, that's one thing I think is important, is just pointing out the cops that their institution is just. I know it's difficult to communicate this sometimes, but just communicate to them that the institution that they're in is producing the problem. All these institutions are the problem. They'll continue to put out whatever the boundaries they set for that system. If the institution for police wants them to be, anti-people or anti-citizenry, or look at us as us versus them, that's exactly what's going to come out of that institution. That brings up another thing, is the whole, vaccine and anti-vaccine thing. When it's just simply, people who should just be left alone. If you're going to force something upon someone, it is wrong. So you don't have the right to do that. So it's like the whole forced vaccination thing is a ridiculous concept. It's completely violent. If someone does not want to be vaccinated, they should have the right not to be vaccinated. They don't need a reason to put some experimental drug inside of their body. I mean, regardless of what you think about vaccines, the bottom line is it comes down to rights. You should have the right to own your own body. You have that right. So you should allow what comes in your body and what comes out of your body. And this, what's good to see is I've seen a lot of people actually. I think it was recently, like 300 some kids actually left college because there was a vaccination policy, I think in California, that was going to be implemented upon them, and they just said no. They just said the most powerful word in the universe, which is no, and they said that, and I don't know, it was a victory. I don't know exactly what happened with that story, but it didn't seem like anything really happened to those students. That is an absolute win there. People have to recognize all these just endless divide and conquer strategies, and that is just. And people get very emotional about the vaccination issue. You talk about like not wanting to have a vaccination inside of your body, and they get really offended. They think, well, we cured polio, we did all this. I mean, why would you not want this when getting into that whole situation?
What I don't understand is why pro-vaccine people are so worried about others not getting vaccinated if the vaccines work so well for them. Exactly.
Good point.
Exactly. And bottom line, it's like forcing anyone to do anything it's simple. The truth is simple, guys. It's wrong to force anyone to do anything. Coercion is not, I don't care what greater good concept you're going to use for this. The most of the evils that have been done in this world have been done under the whole "this is for the greater good" concept. It doesn't hold weight, not in reality.
I've been sharing these different philosophies that I've been learning over the past 5 or 6 years with people, and they get the idea that I'm trying to force other people to see things the way I see it and force people to behave a certain way. That's not it at all. I'm working. I mean, we're all working, at least us three, I can speak for us three. I know we're working to educate people about the difference between right and wrong and the right to have defensive force when someone infringes on your rights. And other than that, you can do anything you want, as long as you leave people alone, as long as you don't use violence against people, you can do whatever you want. But as soon as some violence is used, we've got the right to step in and use defensive force. So we're not saying, we've got the whole world figured out and this is how to do it. We're just saying, leave people alone, don't make us get vaccines. On this list here, I'm looking through here. So I've got age, class, race, nationality, politics, religion, gender, and nationality is just really popping out at me because I see some people are, getting better about aspects of unifying around different religious views that aren't violent, or race is getting better in a lot of areas, worse in some, but nationality, there's people that I know that are waking up, in a lot of areas of their life, they're awake to a lot of what's going on. But then they'll hit me with something like, well, I support America because I love my country. It's like, well, hold on. If you're going to support something, an individual or a group of people, it should be because they're doing something that's right, not because they have a flag or you were born in a particular area. We're we're all in this together. I love everything that breathes, which is everything that's alive. The earth breathes, the trees breathe, the animals breathe, the insects breathe, the universe itself breathes. I love everything that breathes, and I'm opposed to anything that is going to use violence against any life form in the universe. That's the team I'm on. I'm on team love, team life. So like if the United States is going to do something violent in the Middle East, I'm not going to stand behind them because I was born here and I was forced to pledge allegiance to a flag growing up in an indoctrination system. No, I'm going to shake that, and I'm going to be like, no, there's a lot about the people in this region of the world that we call the United States that's good. And honestly, I think that if there's one region in the world that has the ability to stand up to this global system of violence and turn it on its head, it's United. We're like the last bastion of hope here in the United States because we still have our guns. We have conversations like this happening on an increasing rate all over the place. So there's a lot of good about this place, but I don't support my country doing the violence that it's doing, and like, I mean, Gaza, we talk about Gaza a lot, but let me look at Gaza, man. I'm not from anywhere. I've never even been anywhere near over there. And I have so much care and compassion for those people that are being oppressed over in that region. It doesn't matter that they're a different race. It doesn't matter that they're in a different nationality. We're all in this together. We really are. People have to realize that.
It's just people, man. Like, get rid of everything. It's just people on this planet. Forget all the governments, forget all the lines, forget all the different colors and whatever division you want to put there. We're all people. We may look a little different, but we all have really the same things we want. We want peace, we want love, we want freedom. We want to be able to have good, clean food, good, clean water, simple, basic necessities met so we can take care of our higher self and also learn higher knowledge. Because so many people are stuck in the survival rat race due to the wonderful economic system we live under that they don't have the energy or the ability to look further into knowledge.
And keeping the individual divided within themselves is a huge way that the divide and conquer strategy is used by dark occultists. Keeping people at odds with themselves and disconnected from the higher aspects of their consciousness ensures that the individual doesn't have a strong foundation of self-knowledge, self-respect, or self-love. And the more we are divided within, the more we externalize our power and seek out a group or a controller to lead us or rule over us. The less we know ourselves and are divided within as a result, the more likely we will identify with a control-based institution, like a government or a religion, to manage our lives for us. The dark occultists who profit from this condition will often subject people to disinformation regarding the aspects of self-discovery and self-knowledge, or will outright conceal true knowledge of humanity's nature and origins. So the controllers and dominators in government and religion are covertly manipulating and deceiving people into a divided state within themselves and amongst one another in order to break humanity's unity. The weakened, confused, disempowered people then seek out government and religion as the caretakers and chaos managers in society. And then government sets up a system of living that exploits the common person and serves the elite class under the guise of the greater good and the prevention of chaos, when in reality we've been conquered and are controlled by people who have capitalized on our illusions of separateness within humanity. And another huge division humanity experiences that has led us to being conquered by dark occultists is our division and divorce from nature. Our natural place in the world and having a natural lifestyle have been completely replaced with an inauthentic and unsustainable proxy that has left almost everyone dependent on the current system of control. We don't provide for ourselves anymore, and we fear the true rites of passage that validate our adulthood in the natural world. The bulk of humanity doesn't grow or hunt their own food. They hand over paper talismans to a supermarket clerk and leave with whatever they want. Most people having babies in this world see the whole process as scary and dangerous and feel helpless without a hospital and all its specialists to deliver the baby for them. and be accountable for whatever may happen. Because the people have been divided from nature and their natural selves. They try to attempt to abdicate personal responsibility and freedom to the state so that they can take up all the duties to protect, care for, and provide for us. The state then gladly fills that role as the parental figure or alpha controller and enslaves the people to serve its interests. So we're divided from the natural world and a natural, orderly way of living, and we are also divided within ourselves and amongst one another. So this manipulation tactic is used in a micro format and a macro format to conquer the people and keep them serving the elite factions.
Yeah, and you brought up technology, or I should say nature, getting back to nature. That's really good. That's another big divide and conquer tactic is technology versus nature. It's like we have to choose somehow. Like you can't use both, but it's you're either using tons of technology or using none of it. You're either living like Aborigines in Australia, or you're living like we are today. It's ridiculous. It's like, well, why not just blend both? Ancient wisdom from people who understand a lot and have a deep connection with nature and the animals and the life around them and each other. I mean, could you imagine living 10,000 years in one area and learning the land? I mean, day in and day out. I mean, living free without having to worry about taxes or getting, your driver's license permit or all this stupid junk you have to worry about on a day-to-day basis, which is just not, honestly, most of it is nonsense. It's not really related to what really matters in this life. What matters is many of the things we talked about. It's just simple truths such as love and community and peace, those types of things. But if we married science or technology with nature, so it's not like either nature's the only I should say it's not that. It would be technology more in utilization in cooperation with nature. What we have right now is a destructive technology that has no cooperation with nature. It is in competition with nature. That's why, look at all the AI stuff that's coming out these days. The system literally is trying to just bring itself online to the point where institutions will run themselves and they will remove people. Until like all that's left are just maybe a few people at the top, whoever's absolutely essential to run everything, which would just be a handful of psychopaths at the very end of it. I mean, that's all it would be. It would be just a few people running everything. It would discard everybody else. And that's what's amazing is people need to realize that that's the trajectory with this system. It is an AI based system. I'm not trying to, bring about any fear. I'm just trying to bring awareness this is something we need to stop. We need to stop this anti-life artificial system from fully coming online and locking us into hardcore slavery. We have a good opportunity right now to make this thing go on the course we want it to with our collective own choosing towards a beautiful earth that is healed and a humanity that is healed, or we can go down the path of a destructive, completely controlled, it would be an economic-based technocracy, really.
It'd be like a Matrix.
Yeah,
like
pretty much.
The Borg on Star Trek,
Yeah, exactly. Some level of that, absolutely. That is their agenda with this planet. Complete control, because if you control every little thing and have computer monitoring every little thing and making sure everything's good, and you even have machines to come out to make sure, they're even talking about what was it? I think cop robots, cops being replaced by robots. So police, guys, your jobs are going bye soon anyway. I hate to tell you, even if you believe in these institutions, the trajectory with this system, they don't want you, because humans are too unpredictable. Machines are not. They're programmable. Although people are programmable, but we have emotions and machines don't have emotions. That's
most of us still have like a beating heart, except for Dick Cheney. He has a robot heart. Yeah, I don't want to backtrack too much, but I don't want to lose it. You mentioned the division that's created at birth, where we're divided from nature, and that's a huge aspect. Janice Barcelo, JeaniceBarcelo. She was a speaker at the Free Your Mind conference this year 2015, and she's going to be there again 2016, I believe. By the way, Free Your Mind Conference every April, Philadelphia. Check it out, freeyourmindconference.com. But so she goes in, and this, you can YouTube Janice Barcelo on birth trauma, and it's disgusting. The unnatural things that happen in modern quote unquote medicine at birth definitely divide us from our mother, from nature. It's very, very unnatural and dividing. And if you don't eat a meal before, but I encourage everybody to especially if you plan on having children, or you're going to have children soon, or you know somebody that does, there's a lot of way more natural ways that don't like divide us physically and spiritually from our natural process of being born like they do in the hospital.
And what can be more liberating and empowering than delivering your own child as a man and coaching your wife into giving birth and doing it together and taking and owning that situation and being the first and only people in that situation who get to engage and interact with the child upon their immediate entrance into this world. It doesn't have to be scary, and it doesn't have to be difficult. It's an absolutely serious and delicate process, but through educating ourselves and properly preparing for that process, we can become empowered and can take control over the situation and decide what happens, rather than being at the whims of strangers in a sterile, unfamiliar environment that end up really compromising the child's first emotional impressions of this world. All of the trauma that a child experiences in a hospital during an allopathic birth sequence are stored emotionally in their bodies. And all of us have stored birth traumas within us unless we experienced a beautiful and natural birthing process.
Yeah, and then it divides the child versus the parent. You're already not even separate, or you're not even bound together through birth. I mean, one of the most sacred processes of life, you're not even really a part of. You're just kind of like the recipient of it. You kind of get the end product, but you don't make those emotional and those loving connections. And we really have to question and wonder how much does that affect what's going on with our family situations these days, and the just complete lack of understanding when it comes to both child and parent, or just parenting in general. I mean, there's not much talked about with healing. I think it really separates the two. I really think it brings a serious wedge between emotionally a child and their parent. I mean, I would only imagine so. I mean, could you imagine any animal? Like, say we took an animal, right? We took a deer, we birthed it in a different place, then we gave it back to the family. The newborn deer would be so confused what's going on. Like, what? Because, I mean, animals usually bond themselves with their some of their first sites, whoever their first parents are. So, I mean, you could just imagine what that would do to a human being. It really screws with our psyche and our emotional makeup. It's really bad. I mean, we gotta get out of these artificial environments where, like we've been talking about, the nature versus this, sterile medical environment where it's just like there's no care. It's just something that needs to be done. We gotta deliver a baby. And I'm not saying there's not good people in medicine. There's actually some great people out there. There's some fantastic people, but it's the system you're involved yourself in that is compromising this whole process.
Right on, dude. I got not to shift topics again, I'm kind of the king of that today, but I got a note here that I don't want to lose about the division of race, the Confederate flag, and the timely nature of the symbol of the Confederate flag. There was a shooting recently, and that flag was all over the news, and it was being talked about. Now, if you think about what happened during the Civil War, you have a lot of, not everybody was a saint. You got a lot of people that were involved in slavery. Now, most of the people in the South that were involved in slavery were extremely, extremely wealthy and had plantations, and there was a lot of racism going on, but there also was a lot of non-racism going on. And there's inner circle historians that John Taylor Gatto references in The Ultimate History Lesson, a production by Tragedy and Hope that I highly recommend. There's inner circle historians that say that slavery was already on its way out economically and morally. And a lot of that was from the feminine energy of the ladies, saying there was a lot of interracial relationships happening, and there was children that were coming out that were half one race and half the other, and the women were like, I'm not going to lay with you anymore if you keep doing this. Plus, economically, it was kind of going out anyways. But if you look at it just simply, the South was invaded by the North. Now, there were a lot of people that weren't racist that just happened to be living in the South, and they were invaded, and they came together and they fought off an invading force. Now, when you wrap up the concept of a symbol that represents the people defending themselves from an invasion with racism, it obfuscates and confuses people about an empire taking. I mean, a lot of people reference the Civil War as the Second Revolution, and the British won. The enterprise of empire through collectivism and centralization that was prolific in the North came down and took over the independent livelihood that was in the South. I mean, the lawyers were running circles around the lawyers up north because they still had, we'll go into this when we talk about the education, but they still had the Dane school, and they had the trivium education where they weren't divided amongst age in their education model. They would have the upperclassmen teach the middleclassmen, the middleclassmen teach the lowerclassmen, all in one room, and they were learning this ancient, for many thousands of years, passed down to the trivium, which we talked about in a previous podcast, which is, general information, taking information in, Aristotelian logic, removing contradictions and finding patterns, and then sending on what you have. Well, in the North, they removed that middle phase of pattern and contradiction identification, or they removed formal Aristotelian logic. So it was just input-output. And so they had a whole bunch of people that were not thinking for themselves as much, not as independently able to come up with their own livelihood as much. We're buying into more and more centralization and compartmentalization, and they got those people to invade the South. And now when you talk about the Civil War, all people think about is slavery. Divide and conquer. The last thing they want us to realize in all these different mechanisms to divide and conquer is they want us to realize what that one true divide is. And they don't want us to unify against systems of organized violence that come together to perpetuate more slavery.
Because people fear chaos and people fear themselves. And the more that we harbor those fears, rather than going and dealing with things ourselves, the more that these problems and this suffering born out of the problems are going to perpetuate and keep us enslaved.
Yeah, and another one that's been used so often I've seen is the foreigner versus citizens. It's these, here comes the foreigners going to take our jobs, right? It's something you always hear from a lot of these, I should say just people in general. It's like, or people in fear about losing their job, versus the fact that, well, let's look at the legislation that created that. Let's look at the institution that created that. Let's look at the economic system that is creating the need for a job anyway. I mean, working 40 hours a week is ridiculous. We don't produce what? Produce continuous stuff that breaks, so we have to throw it out, so we trash the earth more, and we build a giant garbage heap. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense when you look at it logically, but we do it because that's all we know. We fear, the lack, the shortage. Well, what else will we do without money? What else will we do without our jobs? Well, we could figure that out together as a people, but first we need to start coming together as a community so we can start figuring that stuff out. There's technology right now, and there's plants right now. I mean, if you combine like free energy technologies with the effectiveness of hemp and cannabis, I mean, right there, those two would create such an abundant, healthy, driven civilization.
The energy machine of Joseph Newman with 3D printing and 14-week cannabis crops equals awesome.
It does. It's a great solution to that problem.
On one of these podcasts coming up, you guys, I can't wait to share more information about the energy machine of Joseph Newman because I've looked into it. I first heard about it from Richard Grove He was on Freedom's Phoenix talking about it. They called him, they had him on. And I know it doesn't tie in perfectly with divide and conquer, other than they're dividing us from access to this type of technology. But I mean, it just, I'll talk to people that are affiliated with Tesla Science Foundation or people that are affiliated with different breakthrough energy movements, and nobody's heard of this guy or this whole concept that has been demonstrated and shown to work and logically make sense. And I don't know, there's an infinite will work of nature out there. And there's people that are building cars. There's a guy, I forgot, it was like South America or Central America. He made a motorcycle where he said he took his kid's science book that was in like primary school, and he found out how to get the right amount of electric current to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen. And he's riding around on a motorcycle that he's just pouring water into. There's so many different options out there that it just really could help us free ourselves up. And when we're living in this scarcity, it's easier for us to be divided. If we had an abundant thing and they were like trying to come in and divide us, it'd be like, no, we're doing just fine. No, they're not bothering me. I'm not bothering them. But like, if we're all like starving and hungry, then they can point the finger at the other race or the other religion or the other wealth class and say, it's all their fault. Don't worry about the men behind the curtain running the international banks. It's all the 1%ers. It's like, no, dude, it's the 0.001%ers. It's the people that are behind the curtain, the people that are making the money. It's not the 1%ers. It's the dark occult wielding these methods of manipulation.
And the system itself, it'll perpetuate any type of psychopathy. It promotes psychopathy.
I mean, it makes sense that people who have fear inside and have a lack of confidence and sense of responsibility, how they'd want to have like a boogeyman or a bad guy that they can point the finger at that someone else is doing something about. Oh, well, the bad guy is that country and my country is going to do something about that country, instead of the bad guy is everyone who's supporting violence, which you can do something about by you not supporting violence and helping to build models that help other people work out. Like now you're having to do something, but if it's just boogeyman over there and my team is going to fight that boogeyman, and that's okay, I didn't have to do anything. Maybe I vote or I don't vote, or I don't know, I watch football. I don't know. It's just easier, and it's lazy.
Yeah, for sure. And that would be an example of someone being divided amongst themselves, attempting to abdicate responsibility for their actions, not owning their actions, not having a role in making positive change in the world. They attempt to absolve any type of involvement in fixing the problems by identifying themselves as someone who is helpless to create change. In their minds, it's easier to just remain a child who constantly needs someone to take care of them and pay attention to them than it is to actually grow up, take responsibility for their actions, and recognize that they live in a world that is directly affected by their actions. When people own their actions, they don't harbor any illusions as to who is responsible for them. Conversely, when people are at odds with themselves and claim and live as if government is responsible to care for them and provide for them, they are obviously enslaved by that worldview and are infinitely more easy to conquer and dominate by governments and controllers.
And you brought up a good point with the whole dominator versus slave idea. That's like going between the left and right hemispheres. You're either completely polarized to the left, you're a dominator, or you're completely polarized to the right, you're, a victim. You're someone who just gets abused and gets pushed around. And you see that so much in our world today, that you have people who dominate and people who are being dominated by them. And there's really no middle ground. There's not just like mirroring the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. It's mainly a brain imbalance. Anyone falling under either a slave or a dominator mentality, they're really suffering from a brain schism and mental illness. And they need to understand that is really the issue going on there. And they're going to keep perpetuating that cycle of either being dominated or being violent against other people if they don't work on themselves and do that inner work and stop being divided amongst their own self.
Yeah. Right now we're in a transition. And, it can be called the critical moment of choice for the human species. Since we're in a transition and it's not overt, hardcore, iron fist slavery, there's a lot of people that are really comfortable, particularly in America, and they're really comfortable. And it's like, nah, man, I'm not worried about that. I'm not, and it can be easy to be a coward, to be ignorant, and to be lazy. That can be really easy right now until reality slaps you in the face which typically happens on a battlefield. When the police state knocks your freaking door down to usher you off like some cattle somewhere because of some chaos sorcery that they wielded upon us and some agenda that they have that we didn't do anything to resist or to stop from happening, we'll deserve what we get when that happens, because the universe is perfect in its creations. It's perfect. The effect of what we choose to do is always going to be exactly what we deserve, individually and collectively. And like a baby getting shot in a drive-by, like Joe Rogan says, he's like talking about the new age bullshit. People get what they have coming to them. Well, no, individually, the baby didn't do anything to get shot in the drive-by. But what did the community do to make it so there was a situation where that baby could get shot in that drive-by? We're all in this together, and we have to like individually and together as numbers. The quantum shift, quantum means numbers matter. We need the aggregate of the species to understand that we're all in this together, and that there is an objective difference between right and wrong, and that the only one true divide is those who are wielding violence and supporting that versus those who aren't.
Yeah, and one of the last divide and conquer tactics I wanted to bring up is this whole East versus West thing. So now we're throwing the West under the bus, because, well, for good reason. The West has funded so many military interventions in countries and just annihilation of people and land. It's ridiculous. I mean, since the creation of the UN, I think we've had more wars than ever before. I mean, we've had so many. I think the U.S. has overthrown at least 50 or 40 or 50 foreign governments and just since the end of World War II. But the problem is now people are looking, the East will save us. I hear this stuff online where it's like, okay, well, now Putin's the new savior. Yeah, that's great that he, helped wipe out ISIS or is taking care of ISIS, but is this just a problem reaction solution? Is this just another Hegelian dialectic, something we're just falling in the trap of? We're just finding a new savior or some person to run to. The only people we have to save is ourselves. We got to stop looking to a savior. People are really good at preventing a lot of these divide and conquer strategies, but I'm seeing a lot of people just fall into this East versus West thing, and it's like we have to look. Okay, Russia is still owned by the BIS, which is the Bank of International Settlements. If you don't know what that is, look that up. It's the central bank of central banks. It runs the entire financial system. It is a thing that, like, the Federal Reserve is just a stepping stone toward the Bank of International Settlements. And if your country still has a central bank, you're probably still owned by the BIS. And that means you're still run by the financial system. So I don't know how people can not understand that there's still a divide and conquer strategy going on here. It's like, okay, instead of the West dominating the world, it'd be the East. I mean, dominating anything is not the solution here, people. We need to stop looking to any East-West or any type of solution like that. It's not going to solve the problem. The solution only can be solved by a raising of consciousness, not in looking for a new savior, whether it be a religious figure or some, political figure like Putin. It's not going to go anywhere but down the same road, whatever road they choose, which is more control. And you'll get less freedom and more control with that. Until I see him hang up his 33rd degree robe and identify the Bank of International Settlements, I don't expect me to have much faith in the man. I mean, he's just working within a psychopathic system. So of course he's going to be manipulated. Even if he is partially a good person, he's still playing by the dark occultist rules, and he's never going to get anywhere with that. And we're never going to get anywhere with that. That's just externalizing our responsibility again. And saying, hey, you know what? We can't govern ourselves. Forget it. You take care of the problem, which is the thing we've always done. So we need to stop doing that and start governing ourselves and stop giving away our power and giving away our responsibility. If it takes time to get to full self-governance, so be it. We'll get there eventually. I know we will. It may take a generation or two, but we'll get there. I'm sure there'll be a transitionary period where we have to work out a lot of kinks, but, that's for us to decide as a people.
Self-governance, responsibility. We can do this. We just have to know who we are on the inside, go through our own shadow, go through the shadow of what's going on around us, and come together. We really have to come together, unify around the philosophy of that which is around objective difference between right and wrong, and that which has no contradiction that we can observe, experience, and discover, and come together and fight the enemy of freedom.
And remember, when there are no masters, there are no slaves.
Take it easy, everyone. See you in the next podcast.
Thanks for tuning in, guys.
No master, no slave.